hello there. Can everyone hear me? There is a chat on the right-hand side. If you just pop a message on there just to say that that you can hear. It's Oliver here. Excellent. Okay, right. So this afternoon's webinar is to go through all the latest features from within student billing and basically outline how we now manage the process of either enhancements or putting adjustments in there. So I'm going to just go through them one by one and just outline what's new. And if there are any questions towards the end, then you can pop a message on the chat, or obviously I'll give you the details of our sales team to send over some questions at the end. So first and foremost, as I said, I'm just going to go through them individually. So the first change that's come in the latest release is the ability to now see any unbilled charges or fees that have gone against a student before the bill production run is to take place. So to get to that is within the inquiry section, and then we have student billing, and we have outstanding charges and fees. I've popped one on to one of our students to show that, and it's this one here. So to get to here, this is just anything that's outstanding that hasn't yet been billed. Now, there's obviously a few ways of seeing this information. You can do it via a smart list under the outstanding unbilled charges and unbilled fees as well. But we find, if you want to do it on an individual student's basis, nice and quickly, you can get to here and it shows them in detail there. So that's our first new addition in there. And what we can also do now is we've changed the ability to restrict the lists that are coming in from a system-generated list, whether it's a year type list, a type of student, whether it's a course, or levers. So there are some setup options. So under Tools, Setup, Student Billing, we now have List Import Setup. And from within here, once you've imported somebody in, you can restrict which lists they go onto. So as you can see on here, I've got them all set to auto-attach on import, but you can restrict those and untick those if you don't want those to automatically come on. As we know, there are some issues with the lists whereby obviously they get expanded and expanded over time, and then to restrict them is obviously quite difficult. So we put that in there to stop that from happening. We can also now remove lists which are system generated. That was something that was not available previously. So if you picked up a system generated list, one such as this, and you can then go in and delete that. That's something that's coming in one of the most recent releases. That was obviously previously not available in there. Some changes within the students' cards themselves. We have, if you go to just the standard card screen here, the country has been slightly expanded to up to 100 characters if needs be. That's one of the few countries which came up as a couple of issues when importing from ERM. I think it was Taiwan or something like that, which is the Chinese Republic of Taiwan or something like that along those lines, which was incredibly long, and every time I had to adjust it in ERM, then import it into GP and then adjust it back in ERM again. Obviously we wanted to stop that from happening, so it expanded that field in there. Within the lookups in student billing now, you have all your columns in here, and you can actually do a search on each individual column that's highlighted. So if you wanted to do it on surname, that's the default that comes up in here. If you want to do it on forename, you just click on the column and then select the forename in here. If it was based on their ID, you do the same, date of birth, entry date, and not sure why you would do it on gender, but it's there as well. So that's something that's coming in one of the latest versions as well. As we can see on the students maintenance screen, whether any of you will be using this or not, I'm not too sure, is you have the ability of using proportional splits. What that allows you to do is if you were doing it by a student loan company and they wanted to split your bills 25%, 50% over the terms, you can do that. That allows you, to split them. Doesn't have to necessarily be 25, 25, 50. Can be a combination, as long as obviously the figure adds up to 100 in terms of percentages. That was previously only available on a sponsor and student relationship. Now it can be done on the individual student on their own. Something which is quite important and comes up quite regularly is the fact when you're reprinting a bill, it's quite a tedious task because you have to go through the bill production process. So in order to get around that, it was incorporated within a student's bill that a button was added for reprinting a bill from there. So if I pick up one of my test students, Mr. Daniel Andrews, and if I go to historic bill and I pick up something from 2015, let's say, let's actually go put that one here. You can simply, once you've seen it on this screen, hit reprint bills, and then using the standard format, as it's the only one that's available at the moment, it allows me to reprint the bill. Nice and quick in there. So rather than having to go through the bill production process and looking up the fee batch and picking it up from there, you can just simply pick up the one that you want, reprint it from this screen, and then if you're printing it out, use the Zetadocs or what have you to send it to the student. That's a nice, quicker way of doing it. And right, okay. So we also have the ability to actually import a list now. So if we go into student billing here, we have list import. I have there's basically, it's a simple format which is the list ID and the student ID. That's all it is, and it's got to be in CSV format. That's all you need to do. Once you've set up the file, you simply go to look for it, and then pick it up, hit open, and import in there. If there are any problems, it will come up with an error in the log, and it will tell you what you need to do to sort those out. But it's a very straightforward format, only 2 columns, and then once you're happy with doing that, then that's fine. Let's have a look. So one of the other items from within the student's card was the gender. There was a description which was previously set as unknown. That's been changed to other, as per a request from one of the colleges in there. Another item which was changed in there is if you've generated a batch from within student billing that for any reason doesn't go through to the sales ledger and then to the general ledger, you now cannot delete it. That came up a couple of times because within student billing there's no restrictions on the periods. Therefore, when you do a date, it's that all the dates are effectively open. Then when it gets to the sales ledger, perhaps that period isn't open for posting, and therefore you have to open that before it's billed in there. And as you may have seen when I did the students bill inquiry as well, when you picked up your student and then gone to historic bill, now the ordering is changed, so the bill date is done in descending order rather than ascending. I know everybody who had multiple bills against them, if they were starting from the bottom and working their way through, would obviously be quite frustrating because it's usually the most recent information that you'd need in there. So that's what's changed in there also. And if we come across and have a look at our fee and charge codes. So one of the items in here which is still in development at the moment is the ability to add tax against a charge code. If we select a charge code from within here, and if I pick a nice one which is wine, which is one that we all like, we've got the ability to enable tax and pick up a specific tax detail ID on there. Now it's still a work in progress, so we're still obviously looking at developing on that to ensure that everything is covered in terms of VAT legislation, etc. So we may be in touch with some of the colleges to do a bit of testing on that to ensure that it meets all the requirements. And okay. So if we were to Close that on there. Also the lookup for the fee and charge when we do the print on here, the SSB FDRX print, which is something that many people use on there. We've allowed for that to be slightly wider, the amount of characters that are in there. That's something that came up a few times in support requests to ensure that you could actually see what the codes were related to in there. And let's see, what other ones could be relevant for today. So we've gone through the other items on there. So effectively, the next thing I was going to sort of run through would be how we sort of go through once a request is put in, either it being an enhancement or something that might have come up from a support case or something like that, how we handle it, and how we obviously ensure that it's coming to a future release. Now, something that came up from one of the colleges, which was quite a relevant piece, was there were a number of students that they had in the system which effectively they didn't want to allow them to be billed anymore. So we said, well, why would you not mark them as an active from within the sales ledger? So we went through that process and we found that you could still actually, in fact, bill a student when they were marked as inactive. It didn't go through to the sales ledger or to the general ledger, but obviously that would cause a problem with the reconciliation. So I put through the request, that went to our development team. It goes onto sort of a board in which they navigate through and see what items have to go on to there, and obviously at that point in time we can sort of see how it's excuse me, progressing, and then also any notes that are on there. And then it comes back, we perform some testing on there, and then we find what if that's resolved the issue, and then we release it to the colleges for testing. So we added in the functionality in here. So if you simply had a list of students, you could go ahead and mark them as inactive as a debtor. So I picked up my first one on the list, this one here, ABDI 0002. They're marked as inactive. So if I now try and go in to student billing and assign a fee or charge, so I'll pick up my charge from here, my book award, look at my student ID, they're still in my list in here. Now it comes up with a message that says this record has been marked as inactive in the customer maintenance window. So that now stops you from actually billing against the student who's been marked as inactive, but you still wish to retain their history in the system. You don't want to delete them. You just want them to be put on hold as such. And that obviously allows now for you to not put a charge or a fee against a student in there. Now, the other thing which may have come up would be that student could have been in a list and you wanted to do a charge to perhaps the rowing club or something like that. They're part of the rowing club in the student system, but then you don't want them to be included because they're now inactive. The system automatically works out that they are inactive, removes them from the list at the point of when you're assigning the charge, so that stops that from happening as well. So that came up from a support request. The information came through to us. We said, right, well, we'll have to put an enhancement for that. That then get passed to the development team. They manage it from there. It came back to support. We tested it, went through it with the college, and they said, yep, that meets what we need. So we need to put that on there. So really, that's kind of how we would manage them on there. Obviously, keeping you up to date with progress on that, and that's how we would manage either an enhancement or any changes that come on through. So in terms of future development and things, we're going to be obviously having some discussions with the colleges to see what it is that can be done from our perspective, obviously, to improve the product and make it obviously more user-friendly, etc. There are some messages which pop up occasionally when doing imports that we're doing some work on to improve on those. But really, that's from what I've shown you on there, that's the main new features that have come into to student billing, and we'll keep you abreast of any additional changes which will come up in due course. So if anybody has any questions or any queries. As I say, there's the chat on the right-hand side here, where you can pop those on, or also you can send any emails across to either the sales or support team, and we'll be happy to answer those for you.